Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. So thanks again for joining us today for our webinar on cookie-free world that's coming very soon to a community near you. It's one in an occasional series of our digital marketing webinars. So Angie, if you could advance to the next slide, please. So I'm Joe LaMountain. I've been at Reingold. Today is actually my 8th anniversary at Reingold. And I lead, along with my colleague Catherine, our nonprofit and association practice area, working with a lot of nonprofit, mostly healthcare groups. And I'll let Micah introduce himself real quickly.
Hello, my name is Micah Markman. I'm one of the leaders of our digital marketing department. I've been at Reingold a little over 5 years, although not exactly on the dot like Joe.
So thanks again for joining us today. So next slide, please, Angie. So this isn't intended to be a commercial. We're going to get into the content pretty quickly, but just want to give, for those of you who don't know us, a little bit of background on the company, just to give you a sense of where we're coming from with regards to this topic. So we're a full service independent agency. We've got about 230 team members, and we've been around for almost 35 years. So full service, meaning we do everything from soup to nuts, from doing audience research and audience identification, to doing solutioning exercises, to then developing strategic communication outreach plans, and then implementing them, including creative development services. So we pretty much do everything internally. I think one of the things we like to say about ourselves, which is fortunately true, is that we have a demonstrated and proven track record in achieving measurable impact. It's not, for us, it's not about, hey, how many ads can we serve? It's how many products are you selling? How many people are you getting to register? How many people are you getting to connect to your elected officials and things like that? So I mentioned the nonprofit. We also do, in fact, most of our work is with government agencies, both state and federal. A lot of work with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, particularly on mental health and stigma reduction and telemedicine and telehealth, and also have some commercial work that we're doing, a lot of in the healthcare space, but also in the construction space. And then I like to sort of describe us as a company as having Madison Avenue capabilities, really smart thinking, but then we've never lost sight of the fact that we have customer service and value, like a boutique firm. So we're going to be, as Micah has just sort of reminded me, we are going to be entertaining questions at the end, but you're welcome to point out questions at the beginning through the chat function, and or enter your questions there, and we can sort of answer them as we go along. Thank you for the reminder, Micah. Next slide, please. When we talk about nonprofits, some of the solutions we offer are around increasing public awareness and education about you or the work that you're doing, or a disease or a specialty, engaging in marketing and helping you sell products to your members, and then issue advocacy and government relations, mobilizing constituents in support of your cause. And we've just started doing some fundraising and some lead generation work for some of our clients. Next slide, please. And I'm about to hand it off to Micah. So one of the areas where we really excel is in digital marketing. So we are just now finishing up the 2020 census as the lead digital agency in that area, which, as you can imagine, is a huge undertaking. It's the first census that you could ever take online. So we have digital sort of chops, that are pretty significant. And one of the things that we want to talk about today is sort of the changing landscape in digital marketing and the elimination of third-party cookies and sort of the broader trends around data privacy that are going to impact people who are doing advertising, digital advertising. So if you can advance slide, Angie, please, and I'll just go ahead and I'll hand it over to Micah.
All right, thanks, Joe. So what's going on, as we say here? I think it's always important to understand the context of what we want to talk about today. And so part of what we're going to go through is how we got to where we are today, and then what that means for going forward for everyone. In particular, this is an area that's moving super fast right now. And so part of this, I think our goal for today is to give everybody enough background that you can at least kind of understand the news that's going out about it, and be able to keep track of what the implications are on this topic. Google announced, a new study that blew up my phone this morning around, a new idea that they have for dealing with this problem and maintaining the combination of privacy and targeting that is that is what everybody's looking for. But to start with, the history of third-party cookies. Why do we care about cookies? They taste great. Sometimes they have chocolate chips, who knows, but the reason why we care about them is that they're the key enabler of third-party data and the backbone for effective targeting. So when you're doing digital advertising, the secret sauce for how digital advertising just blew up and took over traditional media is that with this power of cookies, people could keep track of all the different places that you visited online and stitch together a profile that identified not you personally, but your behavior across everything that you visited online. And based on that, they could figure out what sorts of people are coming to my website, what sorts of people are most likely to buy my products, and then how do I show advertisements to those people on every site. So you could just go to Google and say, I want to go buy advertisements that target users that look like this. And all of a sudden, those advertisements would show up all across the internet. As an advertiser, I wouldn't have to go negotiate different deals with each individual site. I could just buy my ads through Google, and all of a sudden, poof, somebody goes and looks at a pair of shoes, and all of a sudden I see ads for that pair of shoes stalking me around the internet. So that's part of the secret. And then, that was where it started. People got even more clever with it, where they would start stitching together all sorts of third-party data sources. The credit card companies would sell what you were purchasing, things of that nature. And all of a sudden you could put together a profile about a user that was even more detailed than what sites you were visiting, and use that information to then go target your advertisements even more precisely and focus your advertising spend on the most likely people to buy your product or to get whatever action it is that you're trying to get out of them. So this was why they mattered so much, and it was also the key secret for the digital publishing world, where everyone who started their own blog could start to monetize it and have Google ads running on it, and make actual money off of it. So that was the start. Let's go ahead and jump on to the next slide. Part of this, I've given this talk a couple times now, and it's always a little tricky to focus it on what people are interested in. And so one of the things we're really trying to do today is get a sense of what topics would this audience be most interested in talking about. So we're going to ask some poll questions as we're going through. Here's the first one. So what are the objectives of your current digital marketing efforts? A lot of our customers are focused initially on raising public awareness or education type campaigns, getting awareness of a brand, driving membership registrations or sales, supporting advocacy efforts. As Joe mentioned, we do a lot of work on trying to get citizens to engage on a variety of topics, get people to reach out to their politicians. Fundraising, donor acquisition is something that we've moved into more and more, or something altogether different. And as we're going through this, I think another part of this that I always encourage people to start thinking about after we go through the history is just what are you using to target your digital advertising today? Do you even know? Do you have a good understanding of what is the underlying secret sauce that makes your digital advertising targeting working today, or is it kind of a mystery in a black box? So here's the efforts: raising public awareness and education, and I think this is an area where some of this is most important, because in a lot of cases, when you're trying to do public awareness education type campaigns, you're targeting broader constituencies. And historically, a lot of the cookies enabled you to target people who are like your existing constituents and like people who are the individuals that you're trying to reach without having to know them specifically. Driving membership and sales is oftentimes, for commercial entities, where they really start, and is the backbone of retargeting and using cookies to retarget other customers like the ones that are currently purchasing from you today. So let's go ahead and march forward to the next one. so that's been the history to date. The change that's coming upon us is third-party cookies are going away. And I guess first off, the reason why the third-party part of it is so important is that it lets you keep track and stitch together a profile of a user across all the different sites that they visit. Now we're switching to a world where privacy matters, and people don't feel as comfortable with Google knowing every last site that you visit on the internet. And so third-party cookies going away mean that we're left with, at this point in time, only the sites that you visit. They understand individually what you're doing on their site, but they can no longer stitch together a profile about you from all the different sites that you visit. The other factor that's going on quite a bit is, the advertisers and publishers are racing to provide solutions to enable you to do the same behavior targeting that you were able to do before without impinging on the privacy constraints and rules that the browsers are putting into place. The other factor that is, coming along with all of this is all the rules and regulations related to privacy, whether it's in Europe, but now all the European rules are starting to come to the United States with California and the CCPA, and next steps after CCPA are coming. So let's go ahead and go to that. That's where we start drilling into that. Privacy compliance and regulation is now every advertiser's problem. You can't not understand these rules. You have to know enough to be able to push up, the cookie notice that goes up with every web page that you visit at this point in time. And it started to matter not just if you're in Europe with GDPR, but United States is coming along very quickly, first with California, but California often leads the rest of the nation in terms of pushing that out there. The thing that we've started to track is what's the impact of all these rules, and clearly it's going to depend on your campaign and exactly the parameters and the types of targeting you're doing. But one of the first things you can measure is how often do people opt out of tracking, because in Europe, they have it set up initially where users have to opt in to be able to track them. Whereas in the United States, it started off as an opt-out. So you'll see in the United States, they give you a message and they allow you to opt out of tracking, but they don't actually require users to opt in. That's actually part of the changes that are currently going through the California legislature. So we'll see if that changes, but it makes a big difference because, opting out, not very many users end up opting out, but if you force people to opt in before you can track them, that reduces the number of people who participate quite a bit. So we have a question coming in. What's the difference between third-party and first-party cookies? So the key difference is if the domain that's associated with your cookie is yours. So you can keep track of all sorts of things on your website, you yourself can track. However, if you have like a third-party provider like HubSpot, which is the question, and you're sending data to HubSpot with every call, that would be a third-party cookie, because that's sort of the secret sauce for how those third-party cookies work, is that every time you visit a website, it would go send some information to Google, and Google could store a cookie that gives your browser a unique ID, such that it could then realize that you were visiting all these different websites. So similarly with HubSpot, they can keep track of the fact that you're visiting all the different customers that they might have with one cookie. So oftentimes, a lot of these providers have started to come up with clever workarounds where they'll use custom subdomains of your site. So sometimes you'll see like you have to go create a special subdomain that's like, if your normal domain is Reingold.com, you might create a subdomain that's like hubspot.reingold.com. And those are some of the tactics that people use in the short term to get around some of these limitations. But slowly but surely over time, the browsers are locking down all these different workarounds that people have.
Hey, Micah, real quick, can you just explain what GDPR is and what CCPA are?
Sure. GDPR is I forget what it stands for, but it's the EU privacy regulations. And it put all sorts of rules into place on any company that does business in Europe that say you have to one of the big ones that people hear about is you have to be able to allow people to ask that you forget everything that they know about you. But one of the most important implications for this conversation is that it forced every website that has European visitors to to ask users if they were willing to be tracked by the website. And so it basically required users to opt in to any sort of tracking. CCPA is the California version for all intents and purposes of GDPR. It's the California Privacy Act. I forget what the first C is, but this was, one of the first I think it's California Consumer Privacy Act, one of the first real privacy regulations for consumers in the United States. And it was some people say a watered down version in some ways of GDPR, but it started with forcing anybody who does business in California to allow users to opt out of web tracking. And so as a result, you get those pop-ups when you visit a lot of those websites that say, are you okay with me tracking, or do you want to opt out? Any other questions on this? Great. Should we move on? The other big trend that's going on, and particularly in the news these days with the recent Department of Justice action on Google, is this concept of walled publisher gardens. And it used to be that in the early promise of the internet was that everybody could go start their own blog, and it was this great democracy of equal access to publishing your information on the internet. The reality was that pretty quickly the tech companies became the new gatekeepers, the new newspaper editorial boards for access to all the audiences and all the people using the internet, whether it's Facebook, Google, Amazon. Some ridiculous percentage of internet traffic goes through a very small percentage of websites. And each one of these platforms has become more and more focused on keeping you on their platform. So if you look at, the DOJ lawsuit, they talk about Google trying to leverage its search monopoly to keep you spending more and more time on Google properties, listing Google things first in search, et cetera, et cetera. And so as a result, it's gotten harder and harder for the independent data brokers out there to get access to the data required to target on lots of different websites. And each one of these individual walled gardens basically forces you to come do business directly with them if you want to reach their audience and use their data. So if you want to advertise on Facebook, you have to go to Facebook. If you want to advertise on Amazon, you have to go to Amazon. Google historically was the exchange of the open internet, the Google Display Network, where every website could go work with Google to have ads shown on their site. More and more, Google is pushing people towards their properties and advertising on their network of sites, mostly because it's a higher margin business for them. So this is just something to be aware of, and another trend towards pushing the historic norm of being able to target people using this open data down and make it harder. Should we jump to the next slide? All right. So when you're trying to figure out where you currently stand when it comes to all of this, in addition to thinking about how you do your targeting today, one key question is to think about how much do you know about your current members, donors, customers, and what's the state of your quote unquote first party data. So first party data is data that you know about your customers, your members, your donors. Depending on the industry, you'll see some folks, especially like consumer packaged goods type companies, some others, they don't really know anything about their customers at all, right? There's always this intermediary of a store that has the direct relationship with customers. Other folks just have basic email subscription lists. This is what you often see for advocacy, public education type campaigns. You'll see they just start with a quick email list of people who are interested in the cause, and that's about as much as you know about them. That sort of evolves into basic contact information, the starting of a CRM. If you have extensive purchase history or donation history or activity, and then the last part is whether you can really keep track of all of the different interactions with your various digital presences per user. So this is actually pretty interesting in terms of for this audience, we have a higher than normal percentage of people who are tracking everything across the board. The audience today is a little bit more advanced than what we've had in the past. But I think everybody who can start pushing their information down that funnel to keeping track of more and more about users, that's sort of the first step in this process. And it's a good segue to what we consider to be the future of building first-party data. So to this point, one of the first things that you can do as you're starting to plan for what happens when I can't use third-party data to target audiences is build up your first-party data. There's a variety of different ways to do that. The way that we've seen that's most common is to start using the third-party data that you have access to today to target users, target an audience. Use those advertisements to send people to your website, and then come up with some reason to capture information about each user that comes. So in this case, the example is giving them a coupon. Email newsletters to keep people up to date is a really common theme. Social interactions, social network interactions is another common pattern to try to capture information about people. Certain platforms like Facebook have special ad products that make it easy to do lead gen and capture information about the people and build your first party database. And then once you capture that information, go ahead and pass it on to some system, whether it's a CRM, but make sure you have a system for keeping track of all of your first party users. So this is step one in working towards that future. Step two is starting to think about what capabilities do you get and what do you need to start building to be able to make sure you can take advantage of this. So the first area that folks have historically used this kind of data for is to do web and media personalization. So in a lot of cases, people know a lot of information about their customers, and when customers come back to the website, visit it, they can personalize the website, show different types of content or products or calls to action, or even different types of images that match what you know about that audience. So we've gone through a variety of experiments to try to see if does it matter if I show imagery that looks more like the user that's visiting the site. Does that get people to interact more, engage more, things like that? Gaining audience insights is kind of working towards this world of reverse engineering the data that you need to be able to do targeting with advertising. So if you can get lots of information about your first party data about your audience, then you can use either information that you're gathering or third-party data sources to go build a demographic profile of your audience, understand which types of demographics are most likely to engage, what areas, et cetera, and then use the targeting tools that are available still in digital advertising without the third-party cookies to go target your advertisements to the specific audiences that are most likely to engage with your content. And then lastly, there's the predictive analytics of being able to build models around which customers are most likely to be retained, which ones are most likely to be the highest value, things like that, and factor that into your targeting strategy for digital marketing going forward. So in order to make these capabilities work, there's some key technology needs. You need a source of truth for who your customers or prospects are. That's most commonly a CRM, and then the associated data governance to make sure that that data is clean and maintained over time. That's a harder problem than I think most people realize. A type of technology that's sort of charged onto the marketplace in the last year, particularly as these privacy rules have come into place is the concept of a customer data platform, a CDP. In a lot of ways, it's kind of replaced what used to be the anonymous user equivalent called a DMP. But this is just an area where you can quickly and easily link all of the different digital marketing activity and offline marketing activity to your customers and build a sort of 360 view of all the different touch points that you have with a customer. And then a data modeling environment is really what you need to be able to start doing some of those audience insights and predictive analytics. There are a variety of vendors out there that specialize in this particular solution set and helping you make sense of all the data that you're now capturing and use it to drive decisions going forward. All right, so next poll question. How well do you know your target customer or audience? Basic demographics and income levels. This is often where, sort of the basic media targeting that a lot of people start with. Media consumption patterns. This is an area where you can, if you have a good set of first-party data, you can match that up with a lot of third-party data providers who will tell you what media outlets your audience is most likely to be consuming. And that clearly gives you a good idea of where to place your advertisements. Whether your target customers are having specific, getting specific deals or coupons and other conversions. And then there's also the how much information do you know from your channel in terms of are your channel partners that might be the people that have direct relationships with your customers sharing that information with you. And this is pretty common. I am curious, maybe the person who put in other is willing to type in the chat what they were thinking, but most generally this is what we find is most people are happy if they have basic demographics and income levels of their target market. So this starts getting into things that you can do to replace what third-party cookies brought you with targeting and the data science concept that really, I think, started with a lot of the work on some of the campaigns, particularly people heard about it somewhat with the Cambridge Analytica scandal, Cambridge Analytics, and then has shown up in a variety of places as people try to do this in what I would call a much more responsible way. But if you can get a lot of first-party data and figure out who your desirable customers are, the people who are most engaged, the people who are the biggest supporters, purchase things the most, things of that nature. If you can get a good list of here's all the people that I know information about, here's the people that are good customers, here are the people that are average or not good customers, you can go take that data, line it up with a third-party household data file. There are a variety of vendors out there who can go provide third-party data to you to then go run a model against it and figure out what the key distinguishing attributes are for targeting. So you can quickly see strong correlations, weak correlations between all of the different data points that third-party data providers have and the individuals that are represent your best customers. And so that gives you a set of attributes that you can then go take and find the corresponding attributes in the various walled gardens of publishers out there to target. All these different tools have a variety of, all the different walled gardens have a variety of targeting mechanisms, and the third-party providers help you map these different attributes to which targeting channel options are going to be most useful for specifically targeting the audience that you're interested in. And then I think the other thing that we have really tried to get customers to focus on and think about is having more of a longitudinal data collection strategy where you can do polling, offline surveys, online surveys, and understand the impact of different messages into different demographic groups, different targeting audiences. And so with this, you can begin to see the impact of your advertising efforts, but also start to understand which audiences are resonating with which messages, and make that whole process of getting the right message to the right audience at the right time easier. Replace what you were able to do with those third-party cookies that could just do that for you. And lastly, there is this concept of continuous refinement. This isn't, it used to be that the artificial intelligence of the advertising platforms could just do this for you, where you could field advertisements, measure, model, and then repeat, and it would take care of optimization for you. That's going to continue to get harder and harder for those platforms to do for you. And so making sure you have a plan for how to do this yourself, and field, measure, model, and repeat experiments to see what's working and what's not in your digital advertising. A good example that we've gone through in the past with this, a group that we've worked with, is Civis Analytics. They have a data science platform that allows marketers to uncover and action on these audience insights. So again, it's this concept of taking your first-party data, loading it up, matching against their household data file, and then create custom models to predict which type of targeting is going to work the best and which messages will work the best with which audiences. So with this particular example, they were trying to get more people to purchase tickets for a cultural institution. They could see, here's all the people that are season ticket holders, what's uniquely indexed for those season ticket holders. In this particular case, what they realized was that people who are super voters, or people who are most politically engaged, are actually, strangely, the people who are most likely to purchase season tickets. And so they could then go take that insight and use that when targeting their digital advertisements, try to build their audience of season ticket holders by looking at people who were politically engaged in the different targeting tools. And in this particular case, leveraging the data to engage new patrons ended up in a huge increase in performance of their digital advertisements. Being able to get those current ticket buyers figure out the truth of who those audience people were, and then turn that into a digital marketing targeting strategy, both online and then using third-party list providers for direct mail and email type things. And so one of our experiences with this is with our 2020 census work. I think when you start looking at our work here, our goal with this campaign was to reach every person in America. And we had a target number of times to hit each one of those people, but we also took a lot of time early in the campaign to go research all the different people in the United States and what their attitudes were towards the census, what barriers there might be that would prevent them from responding to the census, and what messages we could give them to put in front of them to try to convince them to respond without a person coming and knocking on their door. So we built this complicated model and did a lot of survey work to figure out which type of audiences resonated with which message. And then we built a vast library of advertising assets with lots of individual pieces. And I think this is the other area to start thinking about with your digital marketing campaigns going forward, is that a lot of the technology coming into play gives you the option to start mixing and matching your creative concepts in a way that wasn't historically possible. And so you can tailor your advertisements more specifically to each audience that you're targeting. We built this vast library, then did a bunch of, use the dynamic media capabilities of the different platforms to automatically try out a whole bunch of different combinations of visuals and messages, sort of calls to action, etc. And then just had the software itself pick which which combination worked best for each audience. In this case, when you're dealing with each individual walled garden, they know all sorts of things, and they know more about each individual user than any of us could possibly imagine. And giving the power back to that platform to auto-optimize within its network and pick, mix and match the different options in your creative campaign basically gives you tailored messaging without you having to do that same work of understanding all the different possibilities. And it does it without getting in the way of any of the strong privacy regulations that are out there. I think that the key thing is to just understand that there's probably going to be different winning creative for each target audience. And the other part of it is that creative is likely to change over time. I think that's one thing that we're always struggling with our campaigns is how do we make sure that we're keeping the creative fresh and adapting it rapidly enough to make sure that it continues to succeed over time. And by creating a lot of different, a larger library of assets that can be mixed and matched, that allows the platforms to auto-optimize for that and keep that going more successfully over time. And then I think just understanding that the importance of delivering multiple creative messages and concepts to the same audience at the same time is just a fact of how advertising goes. And you need to be willing to take that experiment on and see what works best, because it's hard to predict and it's likely to change over time. Here's a quick example that we ran through, creating a lot of different images, then going through an advertising concept storyboard, putting different taglines, different associated borders, text colors, seeing what would work. So the variable ad copy, variable images, variable look and feel overall, give all those different options into Facebook, Instagram, and then just tell the platform, here's who I'm interested in, go. And let it figure out all the different subgroups within that relatively large audience and mix and match the right message and image to each individual user.
Hey, Micah, we have a question about, for Census, what channel worked best, or I guess what were some of the insights on performance that you can share?
Sure. So we're in the process of pushing that out. What I can share initially is that there was a strong inclination or hypothesis that personal stories would be the most effective at convincing people to go take action, in particular people who are harder to count. So the folks who are less likely to self-respond are the folks who needed more messages from inside their community or within people who they trusted outside of standard institutions to go get that out there. And so we used a lot of that type of messaging, and a lot of that proved to be pretty successful. I think that the other area that really proved successful was and this is not new to this census, this is something they've done pretty much every time, is really focusing on partnerships. I think we had a particular challenge this time around because the COVID situation kicked in sort of right when we were kicking into gear as well. And so a lot of the local partnerships that were historically a real strength of getting that message out in different ways got in the way, or it was a lot harder to make those happen. And so we ended up needing to roll those over to more technology partnerships. So we had a good partnership with both Facebook and Google and Nextdoor and a few others who really helped push that message out on their channels and make sure that pretty much everybody who used one of those networks saw multiple impressions of that particular on that platform. I do think that so this I'm sure the answer that I'm giving is like that's not very specific, and I think one of the challenges that we faced with this and we've faced across all of our campaigns is answering this question, and specifically, attribution. how do I figure out which of my different advertising channels is most effective and giving me the most bang for my buck, especially in an environment where, like for us in this campaign, it was very likely that people were exposed to different messages on different platforms. The goal, I think, was to hit everybody like 40 times or something like that, some incredible number of times. And which one of those times was the time that finally got somebody to decide that they were going to go respond to the census at that moment in time, or was it a combination of all of them? And so this is an area that a lot of the tech platforms are starting to talk about and emphasize, is how do you come up with a model that gives you good data on what's working and what's not. Historically, a lot of people have used very simple attribution models, like what was the last click. And so I see one comment in here: paid search. Greg's giving me a softball here. Paid search is a great example. It drove a ton of traffic to the website and got a lot of people to go fill out their census. The question is, and paid search, just for clarity, is Google ads, right? So you go Google certain things, and then an ad would pop up in Google, and people would click on it, and they would go do their census. The reality is for most of those people, when they went to go Google something, they were already thinking about census, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't have been searching for it. And so the question then becomes, okay, well, what made them think to go Google census and then click on the ad and then go do that? And how much credit do I give to the Google ad versus maybe there was a television ad that they were watching, or maybe there was a partnership media event that they were watching on television, and that got them to go sit down at their computer and Google census. Like, how do you decide which advertisement gets credit for that, quote unquote? And there's all sorts of statistical methods that you can use to try to decide that, or just rules of thumb, like, oh, I'm going to give 50-50 or last click or first click or whatever it happens to be. What I often find is that unless you really take a step back and think about it hard, people come up with easy answers that aren't particularly accurate. Like in this case, paid search is not probably an accurate answer, even though it drove a lot of the last clicks to the website. The question is, could we have just turned off all the other advertising and just left paid search on and gotten equal results? And the answer to that is almost for sure no. And so instead, what you end up having to do is over time, you set up different tests and either do targeting in certain geographies, or over time try out different things. There's a variety of methods, but you want to come up with an experiment where you can run different mixes of advertisements to different markets and see if one mix of media gives better results than a different mix, and then you can usually figure out how to weight your media mix better and more efficiently over time. There's also the software vendors, the marketing technology vendors are all starting to talk about how they have these data-driven attribution models where the software will actually just figure this out for you by keeping track of all of the different ways the different media mixes that your customers end up seeing, and in real time figure out different lifts and conversion rates between those different media mixes. But that requires a pretty significant investment in technology, and it's still something that's getting proven over time. It's an early adopter area at this point in time. So just to sum up, in terms of where to get started next, we try to end these with something that's pretty actionable and easy to get started with. I think first off, that we see a lot of folks jump through and pass this first step is just to create a realistic framework to measure your organizational maturity and to understand where you are in this path towards more effectively and efficiently targeting customers and building up your own resource of first-party data. So it's important to really take a step back, understand where you are right now, and understand what are reasonable steps to improve over time, and come up with a framework to measure that, so that you can set goals and actually make forward progress that everybody feels comfortable with, and start to build momentum on this journey, is what we would call it, because it's not something that you can just snap your fingers and fix overnight. Secondly, we already talked about this earlier, start building your internal customer data assets and get some initial ad tech experience now. We talk about this before the opportunity goes away. Right now, you still have the ability to do a lot of the historic targeting tactics that have been used, although Safari has already gotten rid of third-party cookies, and time is starting to run out on the others. So at least for us, we're already starting to see the impact of some of these new privacy rules on campaigns, particularly when it comes to mobile, because Safari is so much more dominant on mobile. But start today and start building your make sure you have a plan and a method to start growing your internal customer assets, data assets. Understand your customers and get as much data about them as possible in-house starting today. And while you're doing that, start getting your feet wet in terms of these different type of ad technologies, and how you want to try to use them, and what your game plan is for getting some initial experience with that. And then lastly, start rethinking your creative development process to incorporate some of these concepts that we talked about in terms of understanding who your different sub-audiences are and what creative is working for them, using those data science type tactics, and then using some predictive analytics to try to understand which combinations are going to work best, and start putting more experiments out in the field to get real data going forward. All right.
So thank you, Micah. Some great stuff in there, and some good questions along the way. So I know we're coming up against it, but if anyone has some questions they would like to sort of ask of Micah, or if it's more detailed and the questions are more detailed than can be sort of handled in this session, we're happy to reach back out to us. We're happy to sort of further the conversation, and maybe if you've got some specific things that you want to sort of talk about, we're happy to do that, obviously. Next slide, please, Angie. As we were thinking about this, I had some questions and just some things to consider. And for me, I know I come at it thinking about nonprofits. So, I think about if first-party data is becoming more and more important, I think nonprofits in particular tend to have more first-party data than maybe commercial entities and maybe federal agencies. As Micah mentioned, a lot of the relationship for consumer packaged good companies and others are with the retail establishment, not necessarily the producer. But is there an opportunity potentially to monetize first-party data? I know that nonprofits are probably doing some of this already in terms of allowing sponsorships and ads on their website. But if you're a nonprofit with first-party data around your customers or whoever particular interest in a disease or condition, that may be an area that you can sort of be that publisher to some degree. And then, the things that we're always interested in relating to sort of the things that Mike had mentioned is, what are some of those barriers that are preventing you from doing, sort of enhanced data collection or enhancing the information that you have on the individual customers. And then even more broadly than that, to what extent are you even using some of these advertising strategies, whether it be just advertising to your audiences or using some of these predictive analytics to reach some of your audiences and bring them into the fold. So those are always just the things I sort of think about. So I don't know if anybody has questions they want to ask, or if there's anything else. So about some of the information here. Well, if not, we appreciate you taking the time to participate in this session. And as I mentioned, if something comes up afterwards and you'd like to talk some more about this stuff, by all means, please reach out to us. I think our contact information is on the final slide, and we'd be happy to do some brainstorming or just, go through some of this stuff. My contact information is right there. I'm sure you want to talk to Mike and not me, but I know where he is. So I'm sorry to sort of bring him in. He can't hide from me. So we appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all. Oh wait, I got one question from Tor. Good to hear from you, Tor. Missed the first half. Is there a recording? Yes, there's a recording, and I think we're going to provide it to you in a follow-up email. I'm not sure. Is that right, Angie? Yes.
Yes.
We're going to be providing that. So we'll reach back out to you with that. And I think there's probably a short survey after you log off here. So thanks again for taking the time to participate, and thanks for everything. And we hope to hear from you soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you.